There has been a lot of conversation recently about the unvaccinated. We are heading into the winter months. There's reason to believe amongst various groups, epidemiologists, scientists, doctors, that we might be headed for a very cold winter as far as deaths are concerned because of the coronavirus. We are dealing with the Delta variant now. Also a new variant, I think it's called the Mu variant, or the Mu. I hope it's Mu because Mu sounds weird. And there has been conversation taking place amongst, people on late night television shows like Jimmy Kimmel, on social media, that people who are unvaccinated at this point of the pandemic, they should be denied care if they end up heading towards a hospital because they got a bad case of coronavirus, right? And so the argument is this. Today's date is September 13th, right? So the argument is that currently, right now in America, any state in America, any city in America, if you want a vaccine, you can get one. Anywhere, you can get a vaccine if you want one in America today. So if you don't get a vaccine, you don't get vaccinated, you end up catching COVID, you get sick, you get a really bad case where you might need like an ICU bed or something. If there's somebody who is vaccinated but just had like a breakthrough case that hit them really bad and they end up going to the hospital, you should then be denied care because there were all of these steps you could have taken to increase your chances that you were not in the ICU, but you didn't. And so we should be giving preferential care to those that are vaccinated instead of those that are unvaccinated, right? And many people on the left, Democrats, they believe that this is actually a self-righteous or a morally correct thing to do in the middle of a pandemic. Now, as you can hear from my tone, I absolutely disagree. I think this is asinine for a couple of reasons, right? One reason is, do you really want to open the door to where we can be denied medical care for conditions if we knew that certain behaviors that we have caused our current predicament? I'm not the dude on YouTube that could just pull stats out of my ass. Like, I don't know what the exact obesity rate in the country is. I don't know what the exact rate of people who are dying from strokes and diabetes and whatnot. But I know, generally speaking, that obesity is linked to heart attacks. It is linked to diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. It is linked to arthritis. It is linked to irritable bowel syndrome. It is linked to a whole bunch of diseases that we have to deal with in America today. And people don't take care of their health. And so we know, generally speaking, being overweight and being fat increases the likelihood that you develop these other conditions and diseases. Yet, a good portion of Americans, I don't know the number off the top of my head, a good number of us are fat and overweight. So do we really want to open a door where we can get denied care if we eventually develop some disease or sickness due to our overweightness? I don't think so. I think that is a bad idea. I think we should actually be very careful signing off on, creating a culture or a society where people are denied for making bad personal decisions in their life if it leads them down a path of bad health. I think we should kind of stay away from that in general, right? The second reason I think this is not the way to go, you have to realize people aren't viewing this all the same way. And so for the longest time, people in the medical industry, in the medical field, nurses, doctors, etc., have taken an oath, I think it's called the Hippocratic Oath, where they pretty much swear that they're in this thing to save people regardless of any other circumstances. And I'm not gonna lie to you, for most of my life, I thought this was dumb. Like, why would I waste my resources and my medical staff saving my enemy's life on the field? Like, we should just kill him. And to a certain degree, I still hold those policies, right? In the case of this specific scenario, we are all talking about Americans, so these are not enemies, right? And so just because somebody doesn't share my own personal or political beliefs does not make that person my enemy. This is still my fellow countrymen. We just see things differently. But everyone doesn't see this the same way. And there's a clip I want to play for you guys. It's a gentleman named Pastor Greg Locke, who's a pastor in somewhere in the South, probably, white dude, and he has been consistently since this pandemic started speaking out against the pandemic, speaking out against vaccines once that became available, speaking out against masking, speaking out against lockdowns. Now, some of his criticism I agree with. Some of them I do, right? But I'm gonna play this clip, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna kind of dig into why I think this clip ties into why we should be very, very understanding of others who view things differently than we do.
Oh my goodness. Sometimes you just seem so mean. Look, I don't have to be a jerk for Jesus. But if you think I'm going to kowtow down to a wicked, godless culture that is never going to accept me, that is never going to accept Jesus, that is never going to like our church. You see, here's what the left has told us. If you comply, if you compromise, if you comply, if you compromise, eventually you'll get in our good graces. No, because you'll never comply enough. You'll never compromise enough. You will never get in the good graces of godless people because all they want is compliance. Now I'm going to go on record and just say something right now while I'm talking about this. They talking about shutting down this nation for round 2. Talking about masking everybody back up, shutting down churches. Hey, my hind leg if they think they're going to shut this church down. I'm going to go ahead and let you know that right now in the name of God. There will be serving Frosties in hell before we shut this place down just because a buck wild demon-possessed government tells us to. Knock on my door, ask me if I got a vaccine, my hind leg. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord splits you. I tell you that right now. I ain't playing their games. Shut the nation down for a second time. You know why? Because people ain't afraid no more. It didn't hurt the economy bad enough. You know what happens when they shut down private businesses? They open government businesses. Government ain't hurt one bit. So all that to say, don't believe this Delta variant nonsense. Stop it. Stop it. I know right-wing watching. I don't care. If they go through round 2 and you start showing up all these masks and all this nonsense, I'll ask you to leave. I will ask you to leave. I am not playing these Democrat games up in this church. If you want a social distance, go to First Baptist Church, but don't come to this one. I'm done with it. I said I'm done with it. I ain't playing these stupid games.
That was a lot, right? It was a lot. Right? Especially if you are someone who isn't religious or who doesn't attend church regularly like I do. Some of that stuff is just jarring in general. Like the fact that somebody can get up there and speak in that manner. But for somebody to come from my background, like I said, I was raised in the church. I went to church, my parents took me to church, and then from there I became a church musician. So I've been playing the organ for various churches. I'm playing for my second church now ever that I've been an organist. But here's what I would like to say to this. Conservatives, generally speaking, are more religious than people who are liberals. When it comes to religious fundamentalism, right? I think conservatives are overly represented in that area than liberals. And so this clip that you just saw, this is one pastor here, but this message is actually being spewed by many pastors who happen to identify as conservatives, right? And if you look in that congregation or if you remember hearing it, it's pretty packed, right? He has a following, a physical following. He has a social media following as that. He was all over CNN and multiple news organizations because of his statements, and that absolutely attracted people to him because he's the fearless believer, the fearless preacher, and that is very attractive in times like this. But if you can hear his sermon here and you kind of can hear what he's saying, is it really that much of a stretch to see why people who are following that or who hear that message or who share those beliefs don't want to get vaccinated? They don't view the lockdowns or the pandemic or the mask requirements the same way that we do. And this is not justifying anything that was said in that video. Some parts I agree with, some parts I disagree with. For example, parts that I agree with him on. I believe that some parts of this of the response to the pandemic has been politically driven and not medically driven. So some of the lockdowns, politically driven. Keeping people from going to the beach or being outside without separating or socially distancing, that is not backed up by any science that we have. Most people who catch the coronavirus will catch it indoors. It is significantly harder to catch this thing when you are in an outdoor environment. As my cat, I apologize. I'm going to open the door to see who wants to come in. And so we were being given these mandates, given direction that was not in line with medical information. It was purely political in reasoning. I agree with him there. The fact that private companies are struggling, but government companies or private companies that have certain deals with the government, like Amazon does, they've done exceptionally well. He's right. And in fact, most of the billionaires, whether we're talking about Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they gained a bunch of money thanks to this pandemic. This pandemic has not been hurting everyone's pockets. It has not been hurting everyone's livelihood. In fact, most of us have been hurt by this, but for the select few who had their money in the right places or are involved in the right industries, this was a godsend for them. A godsend for them. And they have their own political interests where they'll give money to, to Democrats saying, hey, we would like these policies to be passed, wink, wink. That's a real thing. So on those parts of the sermon, I probably agree with Pastor Greg Locke. That said, though, the portion about, that this is a made up thing and, if you show up with a mask, don't come to the church, which sounds like just a regular statement. And you're thinking, okay, well, then I just won't come. But remember, he's a pastor preaching to his flock. And so what you take from that as a Christian who follows him is, if I come with a mask on, my faith is weak. And so to prove that my faith is strong, I'm going to show up with a mask on. Right? Just try to empathize. Try to put yourself into, the perspective of somebody who is following that message, who is hearing that message all the time. This would explain why you are seeing people not, getting vaccinated. Also, Black and brown people are lagging behind vaccination rates. This is not just a crazy Trumpers aren't getting vaccinated. No, plenty of Black people and brown people are also not getting vaccinated. And quite as it's kept in this country, they share many of the politics that poor whites who are Republicans share when it comes to religion and the government, et cetera, et cetera. Anti-trusting the establishment, pro-religious, right? There are a lot of similarities here. So this should be kind of a wake-up call as to, hey, you know what? We should be a little bit kinder and maybe stop judging people who are not getting vaccinated as if they are the worst people in the world, because they're not. We all have different points of views. We are all clearly getting different pieces of information, which we are. We're all getting different pieces of information here. And so if you are somebody on the left, you're probably you're probably overly cautious, where you're vaccinated, but none of your behavior has changed really, even though getting the vaccine is supposed to allow you to a certain extent, get your life back to some sort of normalcy, right? And so we all have our things that we're dealing with here, and I just really wish we could, for a moment, actually try to understand the other perspective here and not be so judgy. So how could you deny somebody medical care knowing now that this is kind of the information that they're being fed that is leading to them making the decisions that they are making? Just some food for thought. So that's all I kind of really want to say, with this video. Look, man, if people get sick, they deserve care. Period. Point blank, period. I apologize for the cat. Once again, he's just making noise. If they're sick, they deserve care. They should get care. Do not open this Pandora box where we will now begin to deny care for people who didn't take care of themselves in their personal lives. Because trust me, many of you watching this video who are judging these unvaccinated people, you're going to be on the outside looking in. Okay, so that's all I want to say. Leave your comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? We'd love to hear your thoughts, your perspectives. I will see you guys next time. Deuces.